Morning and welcome to Sea Talk. Today we have Chris Rainbow from PVM with the famous brand Mentos, and we have Ed Woodall from the ACS joining us to talk about HFSS, the all-important discussion coming to retailers in the coming months. So we're going to kick this off with Ed. We're going to get straight into the discussion. So Ed, can you tell us retailers what's going on and what is it?
Well, there's a lot going on. It's quite a long debate around high-fat, salt, sugar products and the obesity strategy that the government's really been trying to address over a number of different administrations. But what the government has now settled on is a plan to restrict promotions, volume promotions by retailers, and also restrict where you can put certain high-fat, salt, sugar products in your store. There is a criteria for which retailers are in and which retailers are out. So generally, if you're have less than 50 employees, then you'd be out of scope on a lot of these regulations. But if you've got over 50 employees, you'd be in scope of the promotion restrictions. And if you've got over 50 employees and a floor space over 2,000 square feet, then you would be in scope of the location restrictions. Now, there's a few more clarifications I can make on that as we go through today, but that's the broad headlines.
Okay, and from PVM, Chris, what does this mean for you?
Broadly, in this sector, Paul, as Ed's just said, we believe that a large majority of the stores we're visiting sort of won't be encompassed by the legislation. And our position is going to be that we want to continue to do the right thing by the retailer and not become, the police in store and telling retailers the way to behave. We want to work with them. If retailers are led by a change in consumer and customer dynamics because of the legislation elsewhere, then we'll work with the retailers when we visit to have the right range in the right place with the right visibility.
Okay, and do you, this whole thing with less than so many employees and your square foot of this size and that size, it can be very confusing for retailers and maybe more so confusing for the shoppers, right?
Very much so, yes. And, a lot of this is still being clarified. One of the big challenges we have is that we don't have the final regulations yet. But what we do have a good idea from the consultation that's already been published, as Chris said, that most retailers will be out of scope of this. I think the ones that have got to look most closely at this are those with more than 50 employees, and that includes anyone that trades under a symbol group brand at this point in time. And who has a store over 2,000 square feet. Those are the ones that I've got to pay the most attention to what's coming when we get more detail.
Okay, and there's also this whole piece around when most stores are now using social media to drive their business. There's a piece around, at what time you can do your posting. And again, it goes by that size of your store and how many employees you got. So what are the guidelines around that? Or is there any at the moment?
Yeah, so this is a separate announcement, which is around TV advertising and a 9 p.m. watershed. So you couldn't do any TV advertising before the 9 p.m. watershed. Again, small businesses are exempt from the TV advertising side, and then there's an online advertising ban, and that applies to paid for online advertising. So if you're paying to promote your Twitter account in your local community, your Facebook account, then you wouldn't be able to promote high-fat, salt, sugar products. But that doesn't stop a retailer if they have a social media account or a website to continue to promote their activity. It's only for paid for online social media activity.
Okay. So when does this all come into force?
Right, well, that's the question. So when we were talking about location restrictions and promotion restrictions, so where you can put product in store and what type of promotions you can run, the current timetable is April 2022 for those regulations to come in. We're doing a lot of work with other organisations and many businesses across the industry to make the government understand how difficult that timeline is. These are huge changes for the industry to get to grips with. They're complicated, as our discussions just reflected. So we actually really think we need more time to deliver those. In terms of the television advertising watershed and the online advertising ban, they are meant to come in late 2022. So not a confirmed date, but a bit longer for those ones. So late April 2022.
Okay, and then Chris, what does this mean for PVM from products?
While of course, as you would have noticed from what's been said already, Paul, there's some risks for us in certain sectors where we may be promoting products on ends and stuff like that. But actually, the research that we've done, we think we've been on the forefront of this for a while, doing a lot of internal research and background. We're actually the second biggest player in products, confectionery products that are okay, that fit within the parameters. So, sugar-free, essentially. There's only Wrigley that are probably ahead of us, and that's because of their gum business being almost all sugar-free. So we're the second, and we have products in all of our brands, in Chupper, in Mentos, in Smint, that are HFSS compliant. So we think we're at the forefront of being able to offer the right range to those retailers that, even if they're not under the legislation but want to be seen to be doing the right thing, they can have the great products from us to mitigate any losses that they will have.
Okay, I mean, because when you talk about gum and mint, positioning in stores normally at checkout. If
That's
it's
correct.
not built into the counter, it's on countertops. So, and I know it's a great work that PVM have been doing in the industry with the countertop displays with Mentos, gum and Frutella. It's worked really well. So when we look at positioning in the store, Ed, should retailers now be gearing up to have the right positioning? I mean, it's probably that 80-20 rule in that most retailers aren't going to be affected.
Yeah, well, I think we've got to be careful. We've got to see the final regulations to just really understand, particularly for those symbol group retailers, and it'll be based on the assessment of the individual contract. But I think people should start thinking about this now, because even if you aren't in scope or you are in scope, this is an issue that is a big focus for the government. It's a big focus generally, and I think there's changing consumer habits that we have to all try and address and positively engage with in store. So I would urge all retailers to think about now those areas of the store where the regulations are coming in. So the store entrance, the checkout area, the end of aisle, and the designated queuing area are the key areas that regulators and the government are going to be looking at closely.
Okay, so there's quite a bit of work that retailers obviously need to get their head around into their stores, and I think the great help that a brand could do on this, Chris, would retailers would appreciate this.
Well, we've expanded the team that are visiting the independent symbols around the country to expand the work that we're doing, and those guys are already being trained on the knowledge that we have to date. We also are learning very fast what we can't be exact, but how big a store is, because even some of the retailers themselves are not 100% sure of the square footage. So our guys are being trained to be able to get to that pretty quickly, and then they'll have the knowledge to educate and help the retailers through this. And really, I only hope that some other manufacturers are doing that as well, because that's the only way we're all going to sail through this together.
Yeah, it's clubbing together, right? And working in collaboration with the ACS. I mean, Ed, look, ACS do a great job of lobbying on behalf of convenience stores and the forecourts out there. And your help is always appreciated. I think it's just this guidance to the retailers is probably more so needed now than ever.
Yeah, 100% agree. And we are working on that now and trying to bring some real clarity to what is undeniably a complex set of new regulations. I agree with Chris and I agree with you, Paul, that we really have to come together on this. Retailers are going to need suppliers' help to identify the products that are in scope, and equally suppliers are going to need help to understand what stores are in scope. So hopefully we can be a point where everyone can come together and address those issues and continue to have the conversation.
I think the more to come out today is the whole thing around the symbol group, being part of a symbol group. What does that mean? Because, if I was Malcolm Stores running my own store under Malcolm Stores and I have less than 50 members of my team, how different is that then when I'm part of that symbol group? Because it's defining your single contract.
Yes. So essentially, the government is saying they're working out the number of employees you have in your business based on your relationship with your symbol group, which we think is an absolutely ridiculous approach and very unhelpful for anyone to be able to work out if you're in or out of this. We're working very hard to try and exclude people on that. But that is going to be a key question. And ultimately, I think we're on a path where retailers are going to have to look at their individual contracts and get some advice on that when the regulations are finally published. Of course, will help. But there are lots of different contracts out there.
The one question I have, Ed, you may be able to answer, is that under symbol groups, and this was the question from Paul, many of them have different sort of layers of contracts. They're fully in, half in, quarter in. And that's the complexity around this. The government can't just say you are part of a symbol organisation. It's not as simple as that.
I completely agree. And it's something that we've been arguing for many years, that this isn't the most appropriate thing. The most appropriate way to determine if a convenience store should be in and out would be a 3,000 square foot threshold, which we've long advocated for. So I agree that this symbol group angle or franchise agreement angle is complex and convoluted, and that they need to deviate from it very quickly. And there's a new health secretary who may look at these issues differently, and we've certainly written in to raise those concerns again. And we will keep pushing to make sure that the case is made for simplifying this and reducing the impact on the sector.
Yeah, and then when we look at promotions, I mean, this is really key for convenience store owners and forecourt owners out there. The 2-4s, will they still exist? Do we have to change our pricing mechanism in our store so the consumer still benefits at buying that product at the right price? Because there's a lot of work beyond that as well, right, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. So go back. It's really this clarification or education to the stores of whether you're in or out. 50 employees and less than 2,000 square feet. What we understand right now as it sits is that if you're not in the legislation, you can still have a 2-4. As you know, our great rack that's doing great guns at the moment is a 2 for £1 offer. That can still sit in those stores that are not that wouldn't be part of the legislation. In the stores that would be, so the symbols or more than 50 employees or over 2,000 square feet, we're testing a sugar-free rack, one that is absolutely legislation compliant, so that retailers wouldn't miss out of that. The only thing that it can't have is it wouldn't be able to have the 2-4. We would have to change the price mechanic on that display.
Yeah, and I think that would be great. We could get that over and we could share that on C Talk. So Ed, one big final word. What should we start doing as retailers?
Well, I think we've got to look out for these final regulations, but people need to start thinking about the promotions they run in store now and whether they're impacted or not. You can have a look at our briefing online from our Responsible Retailing Forum, which details all of the regulations. So I think it's thinking about those and thinking about whether you're in scope. But really, we have to wait for those regulations to come out, and we have to give people absolute clarity around it when it is out.
Good stuff. From you, Chris?
I'd echo what Ed said. As soon as that final legislation comes, our guys will be trained. They will have the knowledge. So look out in the future once that's passed for your PVM rep through the door and ask them lots of questions. If you're unsure of something, they'll have the knowledge to help you through it.
So there you go, guys. That was our discussion today on HFSS. Even I get confused saying that word. For more advice, reach out to PVM and to ACS, and we're here at C Talk to guide you through it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.